James Hansen. I'm a historian. For 32 years I taught history at Auburn University, specializing in the history of science and technology and the history of flight, both aviation history and space history. I guess I'm best known for one of the books that I wrote called First Man, which is the authorized biography of Neil Armstrong, the first man on the moon. Neil was born in 1930 and lived until he died after heart surgery in 2012. The book came out in 2005 and it's been through at least 3 changes, 3 new editions since then. And of course, if you're a moviegoer, you might recognize this. This is the Blu-ray for the movie First Man, on which was based on my book and where Ryan Gosling played Neil Armstrong. So there's the book and the movie. I'm here to talk to you. This is a program about facts, and of course historians are very interested in having the facts straight and accurate. But facts are kind of a slippery thing. They're not as easy to deal with as you might imagine. I'll give you one example. I'm going to talk to you about one example from Neil Armstrong's life, very well known, and also from the Apollo 11 moon landing. And that is, and I get this question, I get questions about this almost every time I give a talk about Armstrong, and that revolves around what Neil said, the words he said when he first stepped off the lunar lander onto the Sea of Tranquility on July 20th, 1969, which was 50 years ago last summer. What history records is that Neil said, "That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind." Well, that seems to be a fact. That's what everybody, there were millions and millions of people around the world who listened and watched that broadcast of the first step out onto another heavenly body. And that's what everybody heard. Coming back through space, the 250,000 miles from the moon back to the earth, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. So it seems like that's an established fact. It's been in all kinds of history books for 50 years, and everybody seemed to have heard it. So the fact is that seems to be what he said. Well, what's complicating about that is that Neil himself thought that he said something else. And to his dying day believed he did in fact say something else. That he certainly meant to say something else, but he believed that he did. What he thought he had said was, "That's one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind," which is actually a more grammatical way of saying it. It's terribly, if you say man and mankind, you're kind of, it's almost this, it's a synonym, so it's kind of nonsensical. And of course, when Neil got back and people were asking him about the statement, he was kind of surprised to learn that people hadn't heard him say "for a man," because again, he thought that's what he said. And so there's been a lot of, it seems like a trivial thing, but the first words from a human being when they step onto another heavenly body for the first time in human history, it's a relatively important kind of thing. And so even to this day, there's a lot of back and forth and lots of discussion about what it was Armstrong said. Did he say it and somehow it just wasn't picked up through through space and into the big satellite dish in Australia that was capturing the transmission and relaying it around the world? Is it possible that he did say it, but it just didn't come through? But if you listen to it, and I encourage you to go listen, you can find it on YouTube, lots of different places. If you listen, you don't really even hear any space that there could possibly be the article A in his statement. So Neil in the end didn't know exactly what to even think about it. Maybe he did sort of forget to say it, but he thought he had said it. So as years moved on, people did address this and wondered about it, and speculated on one side or the other. And all Neil ever said was, "Well, I thought I said it. And what he told me when I interviewed him about it back in like 2003, he said to me, well, you know, what, and I asked him, what should I do? I mean, what can we do? And he said, well, just put the A in parentheses, which was typical of his sense of humor. But people haven't let that go. We want to have the facts straight. So there have been attempts by acoustical experts, linguistics experts, to try to get the most accurate reproduction of that audio, what exactly was coming from the moon, listening to it and watching, and not just listening to it, but seeing what kind of electronic register. You know, you can kind of imagine kind of the way if you're taking a, you know, if you're doing a test to tell if you're telling the truth or not. You know, if you're hooked up to one of those machines and the little lines wiggle and it tells a person tells the police department if you're not telling the truth or not. Well, there are ways of seeing sounds, you know, in that way. Sounds are waves, and so there have been people around the world who've kind of looked at the best reproduction of Neil's, the closest to the source of the original transmission, to see what was actually said. And I was involved in a meeting at the Smithsonian Institution in Washington, D.C., where an acoustics expert came from Australia, and he said that he had proof. He could show proof in the electronic signal, in the waviness of the sound, that there had been an attempt by Neil Armstrong to make a sound, to make the A, but that it obviously was not audible. It was not something that could be heard, but there was a signal there that he had tried to make a sound. So he displayed this on his computer, and there were people from the Smithsonian, people from NASA that were there, and Armstrong himself was there. And this man, Peter Shanford, gave his demonstration, and to Neil's satisfaction and to the satisfaction of everybody that was there, it certainly looked like there was something there that, you know, was meant to be a sound. And so the meeting ended, and NASA went back, and I think the Smithsonian people accepted that perhaps from now on, if you're going to formally mention one small step, that you should say one small step for a man, because there seems in fact to have been proof that Armstrong not just meant to say it, but that he actually had said it, but it was not audible. So I guess just in conclusion, where do the facts lie? I mean, we have a series of facts, and sometimes you can have a set of facts, but then they don't add up to necessarily a fact or a final fact. You have the fact that Neil believes that he said it. Secondly, that there have been experts who suggest that there's proof in the signal of the sound that there was an attempt to make the A sound. So you've got two facts that seem to be on the side of a final fact that Neil actually did say for a man. And then on the other hand, you have all the hundreds of millions of people in America and around the world who were listening the night of July 20th and did not hear it. And still, when they hear the rebroadcast of that statement, it just doesn't seem like there's any space in there to say the A. There have been other linguistic experts, a team at the University of Michigan that have studied this. It suggests that maybe, you know, Neil grew up in northwestern Ohio, and every part of the country has its own regional accent. And they actually suggest that there is an accent, a Midwestern accent, associated with northwestern Ohio and northeastern Indiana, which is actually where I grew up, that perhaps Armstrong said something like, for man. That, I mean, I tried to do it as well as I could, where the for and the A and the man just sort of the for and the A got squeezed together, and it comes out. You can't distinguish that there was a second sound because the first syllable and the second syllable were smushed together so much. Well, we don't know if that's an interpretation. You know, that's a hypothesis, an interpretation. Is it a fact? So I leave you with that. We know that he was there. That's a fact. We know that he stepped off. We know that he made a statement. We know what he meant to say. We know what some people think they can prove that he's good proof that he said. But I think we're left with the fact that we'll never really know. There's unless some technology develops that can really, shed some kind of new light on this whole thing, we really can't know. And maybe Neil's right when he says we just have to put it in parentheses. In my book, I talk all about this. In the movie, it was interesting. If you watch First Man, the movie with Ryan Gosling playing Neil, there was a lot of discussion among the movie makers and the screenwriter and myself about, well, what are we going to have him say when he steps out? And if we have him say the A, then is that more accurate now or not? And in the end, the decision was made by the filmmaker that the world didn't hear the A, so we really it's not the best thing to put it in there when nobody could hear it. So, but it was an interesting issue. I guess I would have been okay with it either way. And so when I write about Armstrong, I always you have to take some time to explain this. I'm of course tempted to put the A in there because Neil was a very honest man, and he thought he was very intentional in putting that set of words together. So I think we should honor him by remembering it the way that he wanted to remember. So thank you. I hope that clears up or not. Probably makes us all more concerned about how facts really work out. They're very slippery items, they are, those facts. Have a good day.